Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful day. Today we're going to be talking about how to deal with bad customers when it comes to selling your reptiles. We're going to be going through a couple different types of bad customer because they are not all created equal. We're going to be talking about some of the experiences I've had, some of the things I've learned actually selling reptiles over the last couple of years, and just some general advice that I could give to you. Unfortunately, when it comes to selling reptiles, it's not always sunshine and rainbows, and I think this is a very important topic for a couple different reasons, and I wanted to make this video because number one, I think that it's something that's not often talked about. Number two, I do see a lot of questions about how to handle certain situations and certain customers in groups on Facebook, like the feedback and inquiry groups or the groups where you can leave reviews for breeders. People often ask questions about how they should handle certain situations. And number three, I think this ties nicely to the video I made last week talking about my terms of service, because in the terms of service video, we talked about, or I alluded to some of these types of customers. And so I wanted to explain a little bit more in depth about each of the different types you may experience. And just in case you're curious, I would say about 5 to 10% of the customers I have sold to, or maybe not sold to in the last couple of years, could be somewhere on this list. And I know that seems kind of high, but I think that's due to the nature of what we're selling here, which is live animals. Live animals are very tricky for a number of reasons other than the fact that they're just living creatures. And so I think it often can add extra friction points when dealing with customers because there's a lot more customer service before, during, and after the sale rather than some inanimate objects. And just in my case, having sold shirts, stickers, t-shirts, and that kind of thing, I can tell you that the percentage of customers I have issues with on that side is a lot lower. I would say 1% or less. And so I think part of it has to do with the live animals themselves. But unfortunately, you will probably experience at least one from every one of these categories that we're going to talk about today if you plan to sell reptiles for any length of time. And the final thing I would like to say before we jump in is that if you can, always try to remain polite and professional when dealing with customers, even if they are bad, even if they are annoying or rude or trying to scam you. If you can always remain polite and professional, when the time comes to share your screenshots of the chat, it'll look a lot better on you. And I think it's just the right thing to do. I've seen some breeders screenshot messages, and the way that they talk to customers, whether they're getting scammed or not, is just pretty sad. And so I think if you can remain polite and professional above all else, it'll really help you in your journey, and especially when it comes to dealing with bad customers. So without further ado, and with all that out of the way, let's jump into our first bad customer. We're going from, I would say, least bad to the worst bad, in my opinion at least, the annoying customer. The annoying customer is first on our list because it's not necessarily bad and it's not necessarily the customer's fault. And some of the examples I could think of right away, or things that annoy me at least, is like, number one would be like when people are always asking for extra photos. Now I will always do it and I will always send extra photos, but I do find it very annoying, like if someone purchases like on a Thursday, let's say, and then it's obviously too late to ship out that week, but they're getting their gecko like, let's say Wednesday next week, and they ask you every single day for extra photos of the gecko that they just purchased, right? And it's like, it's gonna be there in less than a week. So that's just something that bothers me. It's up to you. I know some breeders will specifically say that there is no extra photos. They will not take them. I have always done that. Not every day if they ask for them, but I will always send them at least one, or I try to. The other thing that I could think of is customers who are always messaging you. And there is obviously a limit here. There is a boundary point. And if they're messaging you with legitimate questions, legitimate maybe issues or small issues that need to be solved, like shipping things or questions about the gecko, I think that's perfectly fine. I think where it crosses the line into the annoying customer territory is I've had a couple customers over the years that'll message me every single day asking me how their gecko's doing after they just purchased it. Wanting, again, that's the same type of people who ask for photos every day. It's just annoying. And if you're a customer, please don't do this. I guarantee no breeder wants to, be bothered like that every day. If you want to message me here and there, it's fine. But every single day, especially if you're going to be seeing your gecko very soon, it is just downright annoying. It's up to you how you want to deal with customers like this. Typically, in my case, I've always sent extra photos and I'll always respond because that's one of my things that I've always wanted to be on top of. But it's up to you, and I completely understand why some breeders don't always respond. Second up on our list, we have rude customers. Rude customers are a little bit different than annoying customers. I would classify rude customers as people who are speaking negatively about you, to you or to other people, being just generally rude to you, impolite, people who are swearing at you, yelling at you, are not happy with the service before buying or after buying. And I really divided it into those two categories, before buying and after buying. And if you can think back to my terms of service video I made last week, that's why I have the clause in there, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone for any reason at any time, specifically because I have had experiences with rude customers. And so before buying, if you experience a rude customer, my advice is to not sell to them. Because if they're being rude to you before they've even purchased anything, how do you think it's going to be during the sale and after the sale? Probably not much better, right? And if anything, even worse. And so before they purchase anything, I would just say, hey, you can phrase it however you want. You don't have to say anything at all. It's up to you how you want to handle it. But my advice is to not sell to them at all. Don't give in. Now, if you have a rude customer who has already purchased something from you, and maybe you're trying to schedule shipping, or maybe they had questions and they've already purchased something from you, it's up to you how you want to handle it. In my case, I have done both things where I've just went through with it and sold them the thing and never heard from them again and was just thankful it was over. I have also refunded people, which is part of the terms of service we looked at last week. Rare case that I would refund someone, it's typically because they are a rude customer. I just had to do that to someone this year, actually. They were calling me, negative things, speaking to me about shipping. They were confused on how shipping actually worked. They called me a scammer because overnight shipping means the speed at which you receive your gecko. So if I ship out today, you receive it tomorrow. Not because if you purchase the gecko today, it'll be at your house tomorrow. And they called me a scammer for charging that much for overnight shipping because they didn't understand how it worked, right? And so in this case, when a customer is getting rude and maybe angry with you and calling you names, the thing is you don't have to sell to them and you don't have to send them anything, even if they've already purchased. So in the case of a couple of these customers I've had that have been very rude, I have just refunded them and said, hey, sorry about this. We're not going to be able to fulfill your order. Sorry for the inconvenience, and pretty much just leave it at that. You can block them if you want after, as long as you refund them, of course. Don't steal their money. But it's up to you how you want to deal with this. I've done both. I've let it go on and sent it to them. I've also refunded them. So it may be handy to have a refund clause in your terms of service like we talked about last week in the rare case that you encounter one of these customers. Customer number 3 is customers who want refunds. Customers who want refunds aren't necessarily bad either. However, there is some times when it is not the right thing to do. An example of a time when I would not refund a customer is when they win an auction. Like let's say on MorphMarket, I've had customers who have won auctions and then said, oh, you know what? I don't think I should get this animal. I didn't mean to bid on it, or whatever the case is, right? But that's not really how MorphMarket auctions work. You have to bid on it. And if you win the auction, it's pretty much yours, right? And I believe even it's against MorphMarket's terms of service to not fulfill the order. And so that would be a scenario where I would not refund someone. Now, if it was a regular sale, maybe someone purchased a gecko, like let's say Friday night, and Saturday morning they messaged me, they said, hey, hey Sam, I don't want this gecko. I wasn't really thinking right at the time. I would be more inclined to refund that purchase. But if they bid on an auction, won it fair and square, because the other thing is, like with auctions too, I've paid for some of the auctions. And so not only would I not sell the gecko, I'd lose the money, and I'd lose the money that I spent on the auction itself. And so that scenario, I definitely wouldn't refund. If it's a regular sale and someone messages me in a reasonable amount of time, I've done refunds before. Another scenario where I would not be inclined to do a refund is where someone has a gecko and it arrives to them safely and it's healthy and everything, and then a couple weeks later, a couple months later, they kill the gecko, sometimes due to their own lack of care, which I've seen happen, and then they message you for a refund. In my opinion, if you believe in your heart that it is your fault for some reason, I'd be more inclined to do a replacement rather than a full-out refund. However, if they killed a gecko due to negligence, which has happened, and people have messaged me asking for refunds, it's my opinion that you're really not responsible in that case, especially if it's weeks later or months later. Again, these are living, breathing creatures, and you can't really have a say in how people care for them, whether it's right or wrong. But it's up to you how you feel about this. Some people offer, 7-day health guarantees. Some people offer 30 days. I've never done anything, but it's up to you how you want to feel about that. If you believe it is something to do with your gecko and your care, I would be more inclined to do a replacement. If it's their fault, I think that's on them, but that's just my opinion, of course. Moving on to our fourth type of bad customer. This is a big one for me, one that really irks me, is customers who don't finish and pay payment plans on time. This is one that I've had a big issue with this past year. I've talked about it in my last video, but I've experienced issues with this every single year. You'll have customers who take out payment plans and don't finish them, right? And then you're kind of stuck. Because in my terms of service, I keep your money and put the gecko back up for sale, which is something that I've done this year a lot, it seems like. And I don't really like to do that, but it is unfortunate, and I don't want to believe this, but I almost have to at this point, that there are some customers who will take out payment plans with you who know ahead of time that they are not going to be able to pay the gecko off, and will take it out, and then once it gets to the date and they haven't paid anything, ask you for an extension, probably knowing that they aren't going to pay anything either. And so this is just something that really bothers me. There's a couple solutions to get around this. If you encounter these people, which I'm sure you will, number one is something I mentioned in my last video. I would look into a way to automatically charge the customer, like an automatic credit card charge every 20 days or so, or set them up on some type of subscription plan so that by the end of the set period, whatever it is in your case, 30, 60 days, or whatever the case, right, that you are going to be paid. The other thing that I have done, which is something I would prefer not to do, but is a little bit better than keeping the money and then reselling the animal, is if someone purchased a group of geckos, like let's say, I don't know, they bought 3 geckos for $1,500, right? And they did a payment plan. And so for me, it would be 25% down, but let's say they put a little bit extra and they put $500 down, right? And let's just assume each gecko is about $500 each. If it's gotten to the end of the payment plan, they have not paid the $1,500, they've only sent the original $500. What I may do is I may say, okay, you've paid this much, there was 3 geckos in this, they're each $500. You can pick whichever one you want to keep because you did send me the $500. I'll send you that gecko and I'll relist the 2 for sale. Most customers are pretty understanding with this, and this way you still get to sell one of your geckos, keep the money, and turn around and sell the geckos. It is unfortunate though, especially if you've waited 60 days and this happens, which has happened to me. But what I will say is that there are ways to get around it. You just have to be a little bit creative about it. Typically, if they bought a single gecko, there is no way around it. My terms of service is just to keep the animal, then keep their 25% deposit and refund the rest, and then turn around and resell that animal. That's my least favorite scenario. Unfortunately, I've had to do it quite a bit more than I would like to, but it is what it is. And if customers don't want to pay, you got to do what you got to do. And just for me personally, this is one of my biggest pet peeves, is customers who don't pay on payment plans. But that's just me. I would say out of this whole list, this is probably the second to worst one. But our last and final type of bad customer is by far the worst one, and the one that you would least like to deal with, and that is customers who try to scam you. This one I've only encountered one time, thankfully, and it was actually this year on my final year where I finally encountered a true scammer. This is someone who is going to try and steal from you either money, geckos, or both. This one can be tricky because there's not a lot you can do sometimes, and you may just be at the mercy of whatever payment processor you sold the gecko through. So, in my opinion, when dealing with scammers, the best way to deal with them is to avoid them altogether. If someone seems sketchy or something seems not right with your customer, my advice would be to just not sell them the gecko. Even if they're willing to send you the money, if you have a bad gut feeling about it, try to avoid it. Sometimes you're not going to be able to tell and it's going to slip through the cracks. The one time that I have gotten scammed and it's actually worked out in my favor was this year, like I mentioned. The person who bought it and tried to scam me seemed perfectly normal, very nice, asked me, reasonable questions, could not even tell, purchased it in full, right? And then it wasn't until a couple days after they had received the gecko and told me they were happy with it that I received a chargeback from it. And once you receive this, there's not a whole lot you can do other than provide evidence, which is the second step. If you can't avoid the scammer, the best second step is to cover your ass, or hopefully you can cover your ass with some of the information from the customer, your conversation, and all the receipts of the transaction, right? If you don't have any of that, you are going to be at the mercy of whatever payment processor you sold through. I hope that when you encounter a scammer and you are in this stage of CYA, that you have some evidence, because that is pretty much your only hope and is your best hope. So these are all the types of bad customers: annoying customers, rude customers, customers who want refunds, customers who don't pay on payment plans, customers who try to scam you. These are the 5 that I really came to mind when I was thinking back on it, on the types of worst customers I've had to deal with. Trying not to go into any specific stories of people, although I could. I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that you find this useful in the future, and maybe you will encounter one of these people and can come back to this video. As always, the Facebook groups are a great place if you have specific scenarios and questions you need to ask. Other than that, I hope to see you in my next video.